My name is ShazAnsari. I'm a professor of strategy and innovation at the Judge Business School, University of Cambridge. I'm also affiliated with Rotterdam School of Management, Erasmus University, and at Cambridge, I'm a Professorial Fellow at St. Edmund's College. So I work at the intersection of strategy and organization theory as well as innovation. So I could say I'm pretty wide-ranging, and I have a broad array of research interests, right from key theories in organization theory, such as institutional theory, frames and framing, social movements, identity, but also in strategic management, looking at the resource-based view, looking at ecosystems, and more recently, platforms. So I work at the intersection of both these literatures, as well as social and environmental issues in management. So I worked in climate change and poverty alleviation, more recently on marginalized communities such as people with disabilities. So I cover a lot of ground. The core thing that drives me is a puzzling question that sparks my interest, and then I want to learn more about it. I do cross a wide range of disciplines, a wide range of areas, but I'm a big believer in research that traverses boundaries. So I consider myself as a boundary spanner, someone who likes to bridge literatures. And if I had it my way, I would go even wider. I would draw in from insights from anthropology, from as we do in management, from sociology, from economics, from psychology. But within our own discipline, I like connecting literatures and drawing from different literatures because that helps me, that combination and recombination helps me generate new insights. So the core thing that drives me is something puzzling. What is it that we assume about a phenomena, about something that may not hold? So that drives me. So for example, the paper that I did on fair trade, the issue there was, and how can you set a fair trade minimum price that's below the cost of production of small farmers? So that was an empirical puzzle. And then we had to find a theoretical puzzle, obviously. And that came out to be, should you have universal rules of ethics, or should it be based on just localized practices? And by engaging with this literature, it turned out that ethics is actually neither about golden principles, neither just carried out in practice, but actually something which is a sense-making exercise. So my rule is as follows in terms of research interest. Every paper ideally should have a theoretical puzzle, goes without saying. It should have an empirical puzzle, and ideally it should have a moral puzzle. So if you can have all three, typically you kind of have a paper that can fly. I don't always get it right. I get it wrong on many occasions. But I do look at what's the core theoretical puzzle. It may start with an empirical puzzle, and then you derive the theoretical puzzle, or the other way around. But there has to be a core theoretical puzzle. There has to be a core empirical puzzle, like this price example I gave. And the third one, which can spark interest, is if there is a moral puzzle, something about right and wrong, something about appropriate and inappropriate. And if you can have those three elements in a paper, that gives you some ground for writing an interesting paper. So a few years ago, I did a paper in the Strategic Management Journal that was co-authored with a person who worked at Intel at the time. And he was a practitioner. And working together with him was a great learning experience because my other co-authors were academics like myself, and this practitioner was someone from the world of Intel. So you can imagine from the tech world in California. And each time we had these discussions, and he would argue with us, why do you make simple things so complicated? Why can't you put this in a manner that it's digestible for people at Intel and other companies? So it was an interesting struggle where we tried to use the management language and the academic language that we are used to, that comes naturally to us, with the kind of simplicity that could resonate with a practitioner audience. So I feel like sometimes we speak in different languages, and sometimes we need to translate our academic papers for a practitioner audience, and you could say some practitioner journals like HBR, California Management Review, Sloan Management Review, writing for The Economist or Financial Times is about that. But yes, I think there's some level of translation is required because the way we write for an academic audience doesn't necessarily translate easily into addressing a practitioner audience. On the other hand, I get hugely stimulated by a practitioner audience. There are times when I've tried to explain an academic paper, key insights or the takeaway to a management crowd, and the feedback that I get from them really helps me clarify my thinking and my thoughts. What is really that I'm trying to say? If it makes sense to these group of managers that are not academics, it helps me simplify and make my message clearer and more coherent. So I actually find it stimulating to teach practitioners. Now, it doesn't mean I can directly use my academic research and just share it with practitioners and say, read this AMJ or read this SMJ, and we're going to have a discussion around it. But what I do is I try to share either a shortened version, a case study version, or a synopsis of that, and then try and talk about the ideas in that paper and then get feedback from them. And sometimes it helps me with papers in development as well, because they bring an outsider perspective. So I find it hugely stimulating that the perspective they bring is something that doesn't naturally occur to me, or even my colleagues at times, because they're in the same field. So I find this hugely impactful, hugely beneficial that I engage with practitioners to actually do something that is absolutely key for me in academia. Make your message as simple, as easily digestible, as accessible as possible. So I sometimes feel some people say that, ASQ has this style and AMJ has this style and OxScience has this style, and I'm not trying to deny that journals don't have differences in terms of what they like, the key audiences, or the type of papers that they would like to accept and publish. On the other hand, I think a paper with promise, a paper that's interesting and meets the three criteria, as I said earlier, theoretical puzzle, empirical puzzle, and a moral puzzle, could actually fit a whole variety of journals. So I'm not really choosing, I'm writing this paper for ASQ, I'm writing this paper for AMJ. Of course, I need to be aware who are the editors. Are they familiar with this stuff at all or not? That is a consideration. Obviously, it helps if I'm writing a paper on identity and there's an editor who writes on identity, then it would, of course, help to have that editor for that paper. So it's not that I don't look at possible editors that might be handling my paper. On the other hand, I'm not like trying to stare a paper and write it in a particular style that would fit ASQ or AMJ or OxScience or any of our other journals. I'm trying to write a good paper that has resonance and trying to find a fit with the editor, and potentially, I hope, and that's my belief, the editor will choose the right set of reviewers that understand that topic, that can relate to that topic, and that will help me co-construct, co-develop that paper to get it to the next stage. Now, even as a senior author, I get rejections, and I learn from rejections as much as I learn from acceptances, and we get more rejections than acceptances in our life. But each time it's a learning experience. And what I've learned over time is that editors and reviewers actually feel much happier, because I serve on almost all these boards in the journals that I published in. We feel much happier when a paper is accepted than when a paper is rejected. So authors think that editors and reviewers are trying to reject their paper. Actually, they're trying to accept their paper if they could. So you have to always think of it from their perspective. Why would they want your paper in their issue, in their special issue, in their journal? What is it about your paper that would make them want to accept your paper? Because they want to. So if you look at it from that lens, then you start framing your paper in a way that gives editors and reviewers a reason to go forward with it, to co-produce with it, and help you refine the paper, make it reach a level that is higher than where it began. And each time through the reviewing process, I would say most of the time the paper reaches a much higher level than where it began. It's true that SMJ on average publishes more quantitative papers than qualitative papers. It was also true for AMJ, Academy of Management Journal 5 to 10 years ago, would be much more less qualitative than more qualitative. I think in the last decade that's shifted. I think SMJ historically, yes, has also been increasingly open to qualitative papers. But like for any journal, the requirements for qualitative papers typically is that they have a bigger ask for theoretical contributions, which means that you can't be just doing theory testing or theory confirmation or things like that for a case study or for a qualitative paper of a different category if you want to target any journal, including SMJ. So the theoretical requirements are not any different for SMJ as compared to AMJ. Yes, there are fewer editors or fewer reviewers probably on the board, but as a person who serves on the SMJ board as well, I do get a fair amount of qualitative papers. And the issue that I have with those papers is an issue that I would have with any qualitative paper. It needs to be well argued, it needs to have a good theory and empirical data fit. And unless that fit is close, the paper would not fly. It should have a strong theoretical contribution that just doesn't test or confirm theory, but extends theory or offers us some fresh insights or addresses some unresolved puzzles. So I don't think it's specific to SMJ. I did publish a couple of case studies, qualitative case studies. I went through the same process where one reviewer once came back, said, you have archival interviews, but I'd like you to do some real-time interviews, even though there's retrospective bias. So I had to go back, I had to, collect additional data, get those interviews, and it didn't completely change the story, but it helped get an additional data point and get to the requirement of triangulation so that I could have more credibility for what I was arguing. So I don't think that the requirements of writing a strong qualitative paper are different for SMJ. If it's a strong paper, it should fit an AMJ or an SMJ. Even on average, there might be fewer SMJ papers, but that's a historical fact. But over time, it's changing. And I think SMJ is more open to qualitative papers as long as they are well-written qualitative papers. One paper that I thought I was particularly proud of was a paper in Org Science, Ethics as Sense-Making, with a co-author, Juliana Reinicke, who's at Oxford University. So this is the only time where I got a conditional accept at R1. So the first time was a super high-risk major revision. In the next round, it got conditionally accepted. It's never happened to me again. I wish it does, but so far it hasn't happened to me again. And that paper, I really thought I had moved such a huge distance from the time I had submitted it, where they could have easily rejected the paper. And the next round was substantially different. And of course, I must credit the reviewers for pushing us and helping us in that journey to substantially improve the paper. That paper doesn't, it's a bit different than a usual paper because it's an ethics paper, but it's in Org Science. So it hasn't got the kind of citations, if that's what attention can mean, and at one level. But I feel like that's one of the papers that I felt really, really inspired by in terms of, reading about Habermas, reading about feminist ethics, and trying to position that debate around fair trade in this philosophical debates about morality and ethics. And I learned a lot from it. I grew a lot from it. Again, no complaints. People do appreciate it. It doesn't have the same level of citations, but if there were a paper that I would want to promote more, if I could, potentially I'd probably promote this paper because I do feel it's one of my better papers. Yeah, I mean, this is a tough one, right? Because the reason is that it's never one size fits all. As a teacher of strategy, as someone who teaches strategic management, I think one of the core lessons of strategy is that, yes, there's strategic lessons, there's strategic models, but at the end of the day, it's never one size fits all. So I would say it has to be about what drives you. So I don't want to say that my example of doing many, many things and crossing strategic management and org theory and social and environmental issues in management and trying to bridge and span all these different boundaries should be practiced by everybody. I think it depends on what excites you as a scholar. So maybe you want to be a scholar who does identity, a scholar who does social movements, and that's perfectly fine. So it has to be something that excites you. For me, I get excited by puzzles, and I don't care what theory I need to find in order to make a theoretical contribution. One of my mentors is Paul Hirsch, famous sociologist, and one of his sayings that I always recall fondly is, he said, "You know what? Find a problem that excites you, that you're passionate about, that really, really kind of intrigues you, and then find a theory to blame it on." And I thought that was really interesting advice. And some people say you do too many theories, and that's because I get intrigued by stuff that I don't understand. Why is this happening this way? That's not what you would have thought. That's not what you would have intuited. And that makes me wonder, okay, that's potential for saying something novel here and pushing theory from where it was. So that drives me as a scholar, these puzzles that I kind of scratch my head about and want to learn more about, and then that case or that empirical study helps me shed some light on it. So for other people, they like to dig deep down into a particular literature and be known for it. So if you're known for doing process, if you're known for doing identity, if you're known for doing social movements, if you're known for doing leadership, that's perfectly fine. So I wouldn't want to say one strategy which is more focused is better than the other strategy which is broader or boundary spanning or bridges across literatures. It has to be based on your own drive, your own passion, what really sort of excites you at the core level. Of course, you need to keep certain practical considerations in mind. They say about theories that 1 is good, 2 is acceptable, 3 is a crowd. So I do say that in one paper, it's usually not a good idea to go beyond 1 theory, maximum 2, and 3 is too much. So you need to keep some bounds and some practical considerations when writing a paper so that you're not doing too many things, that there are not too many moving parts, because that makes it difficult for reviewers to absorb what you're saying. And one of the advice that I give to people is that it doesn't matter whether you are a scholar with a broad identity or with a narrow, a more focused identity. At the end of the day, make sure that you make your reading accessible. Sometimes you forget we don't write for ourselves only. We write for an audience. And sometimes we forget in our own excitement about writing our papers, we get all excited about our paper, sometimes forgetting that this is meant for an audience. And this audience is, of course, initially the reviewers and the editor, but then other readers, peers, right? So what can you do to make your argument as simple, as accessible, as easy to understand as possible? So over time, as I've grown as a scholar, I've moved away from using jargon or trying to impress with some specific terminology, but trying to express things as simply as possible. If I discuss this with a 5-year-old, would he or she be able to understand this? That's my test. If it makes no sense to that person, I have to work harder. Can I make an elevator pitch? I'm sharing an elevator with you. We have a minute. Can I give away the cool key insights of my paper in that 30 seconds? If I can, it's a good test. So try and write a 100-word abstract of your paper. And that forces you to express yourself concisely, quickly, coherently, and effectively in a very, very concise manner, 100 words, let's say 150 words. That forces you to really think about what is the paper about, what is the puzzle, what's the insight that you're offering, what's the distinctive contribution. So I would advise people to do that. Try that 100-word abstract exercise, try an elevator pitch. Talk to your friends who have nothing to do with your discipline. Try to think what they feel about your paper. Try and share them with people who have literally no background in it. If you can explain it to them, you're in a good place. So how do you make your paper as easy, as less cognitively straining to reviewers as possible? Just one last example I would say is that imagine people spend up to 500 to 1,000 hours on a paper. That's the time an average person spends, up to 1,000 hours on a paper. 1,000 hours. Now imagine you have reviewers who are reading your paper in like 1.5 hours. So imagine you've put in 1,000 hours on it. They have 1.5 hours, 2 hours to read your paper. So you have to make life easy for them. You have to make sure that your 1,000 hours is not overwhelming them and making them think of, oh my God, what is this really about? How do you convey it in a manner that they're able to pick the key insights in that limited period and be able to abstract from it, get what you're saying, and then help you improve and refine it. So I think that is the key challenge. How do you make your paper as easy as possible, as cognitively less straining as possible, without confusing your audience? That is the key challenge that I think scholars face, including myself, and it's a constant effort that I hope I get better at over time. Thank you so much for inviting me again. This is an excellent place. I've never been welcomed so much. It's a beautiful city and absolutely beautiful people. So very glad to be here, and thank you once again.